Welcome to the Arborist-podcast. This podcast is designed to help you study for the Certified Arborist Exam by breaking the material down into short, easy-to-follow episodes. Before we begin, it's important to note that this podcast is not affiliated with or endorsed by the International Society of Arboriculture, also known as the ISA. This is an independent educational resource created to support arborists as they study for the certification exam. Whether you're just starting out in arboriculture or you've been working with trees for years, this podcast will begin with the basics and gradually build your knowledge over time. In this first episode, we're starting at the foundation. What is arboriculture, and what does it really mean to be an arborist? What is arboriculture? At its core, arboriculture is the study and care of trees, shrubs, and other woody plants, especially those growing in urban and managed environments. The word arboriculture comes from the Latin word arbor, meaning tree, and culture, meaning care or cultivation. In simple terms, arboriculture means the care of trees. Unlike forestry, which focuses on managing large forests mainly for timber or land use, arboriculture focuses on individual trees. These are the trees you see in cities, parks, yards, along streets, and on campuses. Arboriculture is about keeping trees healthy, safe, and well managed throughout their entire lives. What does an arborist do? An arborist is a professional who practices arboriculture. That means an arborist doesn't just cut trees down. An arborist evaluates trees, maintains them, and makes informed decisions about their care. Common responsibilities include pruning, planting, diagnosing tree problems, managing risk, and sometimes removing trees when they become unsafe or unhealthy. Arborists work with living organisms. Trees grow, respond to stress, and react to their environment over time. Because of this, arboriculture is both a science and a skilled trade. Understanding how trees function biologically is what separates professional arboriculture from simple tree cutting. Why tree biology matters? Tree biology is the foundation of everything an arborist does. Every decision, whether it's pruning, fertilizing, or diagnosing decline, is based on how trees grow and function. When you understand how a tree moves water, stores energy, and responds to injury, you make better decisions in the field. This is why the Certified Arborist Exam begins with tree biology. Before learning about pruning, soils, or tree risk, you first need to understand how trees function as living systems. Throughout this podcast series, we'll return to these biological principles and build on them step by step. Arboriculture in the real world. In real-world arboriculture, no two trees are exactly the same. Urban trees face stress from compacted soils, limited rooting space, pollution, mechanical damage, and improper pruning. An arborist uses biological knowledge to recognize stress, predict problems, and choose appropriate management strategies. For example, understanding how trees respond to injury helps arborists decide where and how to make pruning cuts. Knowing how trees grow helps determine when pruning should or should not be done. These concepts may sound simple right now, but they form the backbone of professional decision-making. Setting the stage for this series. This podcast will follow a structured path based on the Certified Arborist Study Guide. Each episode will focus on one topic at a time. We'll start simple, clearly define terms, and gradually add layers of understanding. As the series progresses, I'll reference earlier topics so you can connect new information to what you've already learned. You don't need to memorize everything at once. The goal is understanding the material, not just passing a test. Let's quickly recap. Arboriculture is the study and care of trees in managed environments. An arborist is a professional who applies this knowledge to maintain tree health, safety, and longevity. Tree biology is the foundation of arboriculture and the starting point for the certification exam. In the next episode, we'll begin Domain 1 by looking at how trees are classified. We'll talk about broadleaf trees, conifers, and why classification matters for arborists. Thanks for listening to the Arborist-podcast. Let's keep building your arborist knowledge one topic at a time. Arborist-podcast, Episode 2, Tree Classification Basics, Understanding How Trees Are Grouped. Welcome back to the Arborist-podcast. This podcast is designed to help you study for the Certified Arborist exam by breaking the material down into short, easy-to-follow episodes. As a reminder, this podcast is not affiliated with or endorsed by the International Society of Arboriculture. It's an independent educational resource created to support arborists as they prepare for the certification exam. In the last episode, we talked about what arboriculture is and what it means to be an arborist. Today, we're going to build on that foundation by looking at how trees are classified. Understanding tree classification helps arborists communicate clearly, recognize patterns in tree growth, and make better management decisions. Why? Tree classification matters. Tree classification is simply a way of grouping trees based on shared characteristics. For arborists, classification helps organize the huge variety of trees we work with into understandable groups. It allows us to predict how a tree might grow, respond to pruning, or react to stress. From an exam perspective, classification provides a framework that many other topics build on, including tree biology, identification, and management practices. Rather than memorizing individual trees right away, classification helps you understand the bigger picture. Broadleaf trees and conifers. One of the most basic ways trees are classified is by their leaf type. Broadleaf trees usually have wide, flat leaves. These are the trees that most people think of when they imagine shade trees. Examples include maples, oaks, and elms. Conifers typically have needles or scale-like leaves. These trees often produce cones and are commonly evergreen, though there are exceptions. This distinction matters because leaf type influences how trees photosynthesize, lose water, and respond to environmental conditions. Deciduous and evergreen trees. Another common classification is based on whether a tree loses its leaves seasonally. Deciduous trees shed their leaves each year, usually in response to colder temperatures or dry seasons. This helps reduce water loss and damage during unfavorable conditions. Evergreen trees keep their leaves year-round. Their needles or scales are adapted to reduce water loss and withstand colder or drier environments. It's important to remember that broadleaf and deciduous are not the same thing. Just as conifer and evergreen are not exactly the same, some broadleaf trees are evergreen and some conifers lose their needles. Gymnosperms and angiosperms trees can also be classified by how they reproduce. Gymnosperms produce seeds that are not enclosed in a fruit. Most conifers fall into this group. Their seeds are often found in cones. Angiosperms produce flowers and seeds enclosed within fruits. Most broadleaf trees are angiosperms. This distinction becomes important later when discussing tree reproduction, growth patterns, and evolutionary differences. How classification helps. Arborists understanding tree classification helps arborists anticipate tree behavior. Knowing whether a tree is a conifer or a broadleaf species can influence pruning timing, pest susceptibility, and growth expectations. Classification also helps arborists communicate effectively with other professionals. When everyone understands the same categories, discussions about tree care become clearer and more precise. Over time, these classifications become second nature and help guide daily decision-making in the field. Connecting back to tree biology. This topic connects directly back to tree biology, which we discussed in the previous episode. The way trees are classified often reflects differences in their structure, growth, and physiological processes. As we continue through Domain 1, you'll see these classifications come up again when we talk about roots, stems, leaves, and energy movement within trees. Let's recap the key points from today's episode. Tree classification is a way of grouping trees based on shared characteristics. Arborists commonly classify trees as broadleaf or conifer, deciduous or evergreen, and gymnosperms or angiosperms. These classifications help arborists understand tree behavior, communicate clearly, and make informed management decisions. In the next episode, we'll take a closer look at tree cells and tissues. We'll start breaking down how trees move water, transport energy, and grow from the inside out. Thanks for listening to the Arborist-podcast. Let's keep building your arborist knowledge one topic at a time. Arborist-podcast, Episode 3. Tree cells and tissues, how trees are built, and how they function. Welcome back to the Arborist-podcast. This podcast is designed to help you study for the Certified Arborist Exam by breaking the material down into short, easy-to-follow episodes. As a reminder, this podcast is not affiliated with or endorsed by the International Society of Arboriculture. It's an independent educational resource created to support arborists preparing for the certification exam. In the last episode, we talked about how trees are classified and why those classifications matter. Today, we're moving deeper into tree biology by looking at tree cells and tissues. This episode is about understanding what trees are made of and how their internal systems work together. Why cells matter in arboriculture. All living things are made of cells, and trees are no exception. Cells are the smallest living units in a tree. Even though we can't see them without a microscope, everything a tree does starts at the cellular level. Growth, energy storage, water movement, and response to injury all depend on how tree cells function. For arborists, understanding cells helps explain why trees respond the way they do to pruning, damage, and stress. Basic structure of a tree cell. Tree cells share many features with other plant cells. Each cell is surrounded by a rigid cell wall, which provides structure and support. Inside the cell is a membrane that controls what enters and leaves. Tree cells also contain a nucleus, which controls cell activity, and specialized structures that carry out specific functions. One important feature of plant cells is the presence of chloroplasts. These are found mainly in leaves and are responsible for photosynthesis, the process that allows trees to make their own food. From cells to tissues, while individual cells perform specific jobs, most tree functions rely on groups of cells working together. These groups of similar cells are called tissues. In trees, tissues are organized into systems that transport water, move energy, provide support, and allow growth. Understanding tissues is more important for arborists than memorizing individual cell parts, because tissues are what we interact with when we prune, wound, or examine a tree. Xylem, moving water and providing support. Xylem is the tissue responsible for moving water and dissolved minerals from the roots up to the leaves. This movement happens through specialized xylem cells that form long continuous pathways inside the tree. Xylem also provides structural support. Wood is made mostly of xylem tissue, which is why it plays such a large role in tree strength and stability. When arborists talk about sapwood and heartwood, they're talking about different parts of the xylem system. Phloem, transporting energy. Phloem is the tissue responsible for moving sugars and other energy products throughout the tree. These sugars are produced in the leaves through photosynthesis and then transported to areas that need energy, such as growing roots, developing buds, and storage tissues. Unlike xylem, phloem moves materials in multiple directions, depending on where energy is needed. Damage to the phloem can severely affect a tree's health, even if the tree initially looks stable. Cambium, the growth layer, between the xylem and phloem is a thin layer of tissue called the cambium. The cambium is responsible for secondary growth, which increases the diameter of the tree over time. Each growing season, the cambium produces new xylem on the inside and new phloem on the outside. This process creates growth rings that arborists can see when wood is cut. Because the cambium is so thin and active, it's especially vulnerable to injury. Why this matters to arborists. Understanding cells and tissues helps arborists make better decisions. This episode builds directly on what we've already covered. This knowledge will become even more important when we talk about tree defense, pruning practices, and tree risk. When a tree is girdled or severely damaged, it's often the phloem that's affected first, leading to decline even though the tree may still be standing. When you prune a branch, you're cutting through xylem, phloem, and cambium. Knowing how these tissues respond to injury helps explain wound closure and decay development. Tree classification helps group trees by shared traits, while tree cells and tissues explain how those traits function internally. As we move forward, we'll continue building from these internal systems outward to roots, stems, and leaves. Let's recap the key points. Trees are made of cells, which form tissues that carry out essential functions. Xylem moves water and provides structure. Phloem transports energy. The cambium produces new growth and increases tree diameter. Understanding these tissues helps arborists explain tree growth, stress responses, and reactions to injury. In the next episode, we'll shift our focus below ground and talk about tree roots. We'll look at root structure, growth patterns, and why roots are so critical to tree health and stability. Thanks for listening to the Arborist-podcast. Let's keep building your arborist knowledge one topic at a time. Arborist-podcast, episode 4, Tree Roots, Structure, Growth, and Function Intro. Welcome back to the Arborist-podcast. This podcast is designed to help you study for the Certified Arborist Exam by breaking the material down into short, easy-to-follow episodes. As a reminder, this podcast is not affiliated with or endorsed by the International Society of Arboriculture. It's an independent educational resource created to support arborists preparing for the certification exam. In the last episode, we talked about tree cells and tissues and how trees move water and energy internally. Today, we're going to move below ground and focus on tree roots. Roots are often overlooked, but they play a critical role in tree health, stability, and survival. Why roots matter. Roots serve several essential functions for trees. They anchor the tree in the soil, absorb water and nutrients, store energy, and interact with soil organisms. If roots are unhealthy or damaged, the entire tree is affected, even if the canopy initially looks fine. For arborists, understanding roots is especially important because most root problems happen out of sight and are often discovered only after decline or failure begins. Types of tree roots. Tree root systems are made up of different types of roots, each with a specific role. Large structural roots provide anchorage and help stabilize the tree. These roots extend outward from the trunk, usually within the upper portion of the soil. Smaller absorbing roots are responsible for taking up water and nutrients. These fine roots are short-lived and constantly being replaced. Most of a tree's absorbing roots are found in the top portion of the soil, where oxygen, moisture, and nutrients are most available. Root growth patterns. A common misconception is that tree roots grow deep into the ground. In reality, most tree roots grow outward, not downward. They typically spread far beyond the canopy edge, often 2 to 3 times the width of the crown. Roots grow where conditions are favorable. They need oxygen, moisture, and space. Compacted or poorly drained soils restrict root growth and limit tree health. Understanding root growth patterns helps arborists assess risk, plan planting locations, and avoid damaging roots during construction activities. Root functions in detail. Roots absorb water and dissolve nutrients from the soil and transport them upward through the xylem. They also store carbohydrates produced in the leaves. This stored energy helps trees survive stress, produce new growth, and recover from injury. Roots interact closely with soil organisms, including beneficial fungi. These relationships improve nutrient uptake and overall tree health. Because roots are living tissues, they are sensitive to changes in soil conditions, including compaction, grading, and changes in moisture levels. Root damage and tree health. Root damage can have serious long-term effects on trees. Construction activities, trenching, soil compaction, and changes in grade can all reduce root function. Unlike branches, roots cannot simply be replaced without consequences. Damage often leads to reduced water uptake, energy loss, decline, and increased risk of failure. This is why arborists place such importance on protecting root zones and maintaining healthy soil conditions. Connecting roots to stability and risk. Roots play a major role in tree stability. A healthy, well-distributed root system helps trees resist wind and mechanical forces. When roots are damaged or restricted, trees may become unstable, even if the trunk and canopy appear sound. Later in this series, when we talk about tree risk assessment, root health will be a critical factor in evaluating tree safety. This episode connects directly to what we've already covered. Tree cells and tissues explain how roots absorb and transport water. Tree classification influences root structure and growth habits. As we continue through tree biology, you'll see how roots work together with stems and leaves to support the entire tree. Let's recap the key points from today's episode. Roots anchor the tree, absorb water and nutrients, store energy, and interact with soil organisms. Most roots grow outward in the upper soil layers, not deep underground. Root health is essential to overall tree health, stability, and long-term survival. In the next episode, we'll move upward and focus on the trunk and stem of the tree. We'll talk about bark, sapwood, heartwood, and how stems support and transport materials throughout the tree. Thanks for listening to the Arborist-podcast. Let's keep building your arborist knowledge, one topic at a time. Arborist-podcast, Episode 5, The Tree Trunk and Stem, Structure, Support, and Transport. Welcome back to the Arborist-podcast. This podcast is designed to help you study for the Certified Arborist exam by breaking the material down into short, easy-to-follow episodes. As a reminder, this podcast is not affiliated with or endorsed by the International Society of Arboriculture. It's an independent educational resource created to support arborists preparing for the certification exam. In the last episode, we focused on tree roots and their role in anchorage, absorption, and stability. Today, we're moving upward and taking a closer look at the trunk and stem of the tree. The trunk connects everything together. It supports the canopy, protects vital tissues, and transports water and energy throughout the tree. What is the trunk and stem? The trunk, sometimes called the stem, is the main structural axis of the tree. Its primary roles are support, protection, and transport. The trunk holds the branches and leaves upright, allowing them to capture sunlight. It also serves as the main highway for water, nutrients, and energy, moving between roots and leaves. For arborists, understanding trunk structure is critical for pruning decisions, risk assessment, and evaluating tree health. Bark, the tree's protective layer. The outermost part of the trunk is the bark. Bark protects the tree from physical injury, temperature extremes, pests, and disease, and it also helps reduce water loss from internal tissues. Damage to the bark can expose sensitive tissues underneath, especially the cambium and phloem. This is why trunk wounds, mower damage, and improper pruning can have serious long-term effects. Unlike human skin, bark does not heal. Trees respond to bark injury by sealing off damaged areas rather than repairing them. Sapwood and heartwood. Beneath the bark is the wood of the tree, which is primarily made up of xylem tissue. Sapwood is the outer, living portion of the xylem. It actively transports water and dissolved minerals from the roots to the leaves. Heartwood is the inner, non-living portion of the xylem. It no longer transports water, but it provides structural support and strength. As trees age, older sapwood is gradually converted into heartwood. Both are essential to the tree's overall function and stability. Growth rings and what they tell us. Trees add new layers of wood each growing season. This process creates growth rings that can be seen when wood is cut. Each ring represents a period of growth, usually 1 year. Wide rings generally indicate favorable growing conditions, while narrow rings may reflect stress, drought, or competition. For arborists, growth rings help explain past conditions and can provide clues about a tree's health history. Transport within the stem. The trunk is a major transport system. Water and minerals move upward through the xylem from the roots to the leaves. Sugars produced in the leaves move through the phloem to growing and storage areas. Because these tissues are concentrated just beneath the bark, damage to the outer stem can interrupt transport and lead to decline. This is why girdling, severe bark damage, or improper staking can be fatal to trees. Why stem structure matters to arborists. Understanding trunk and stem structure helps arborists assess both health and risk. Cracks, decay, cavities, and included bark can all weaken structural integrity. At the same time, trees can often tolerate internal decay if enough sound wood remains to support loads. Later in the series, when we discuss tree defense and risk assessment, stem structure will play a major role in evaluating tree safety. This episode builds directly on what we've already covered. Roots absorb water and anchor the tree. The trunk transports that water upward and supports the canopy. Cells and tissues explain how these systems function internally. Together, roots and stems form the structural and transport backbone of the tree. Let's recap the key points. The trunk supports the tree, protects internal tissues, and transports water and energy. Bark serves as protection, sapwood moves water, and heartwood provides strength. Understanding stem structure helps arborists make better decisions about pruning, injury management, and tree risk. In the next episode, we'll move into the canopy and focus on leaves and photosynthesis. We'll talk about how trees capture energy and why leaves are so important to overall tree health. Thanks for listening to the Arborist-podcast. Let's keep building your arborist knowledge one topic at a time. Arborist-podcast, Episode 6, Leaves and Photosynthesis, How Trees Capture and Use Energy. Welcome back to the Arborist-podcast. This podcast is designed to help you study for the Certified Arborist Exam by breaking the material down into short, easy-to-follow episodes. As a reminder, this podcast is not affiliated with or endorsed by the International Society of Arboriculture. It's an independent educational resource created to support arborists preparing for the certification exam. In the last episode, we focused on the trunk and stem of the tree and how they support and transport materials throughout the tree. Today, we're moving into the canopy to talk about leaves and photosynthesis. Leaves are the primary energy producers in a tree, and without them, trees could not survive. Why leaves matter? Leaves play a critical role in tree health and growth. Their main function is photosynthesis, the process by which trees convert sunlight into usable energy. Leaves also help regulate water loss, exchange gases with the atmosphere, and cool the tree through transpiration. For arborists, understanding how leaves function helps explain how trees respond to pruning, stress, and environmental changes. Basic leaf structure. While leaf shapes vary widely, most leaves share common structural features. The flat surface of the leaf, called the blade, is designed to capture sunlight efficiently. Inside the leaf are specialized cells containing chloroplasts, which hold chlorophyll. Chlorophyll is the pigment that absorbs light energy for photosynthesis. Leaves also contain veins, which are made up of xylem and phloem. These veins transport water into the leaf and sugars out to the rest of the tree. How photosynthesis works. Photosynthesis allows trees to make their own food using sunlight, carbon dioxide from the air, and water from the soil. Trees produce sugars that supply energy for growth and maintenance. Oxygen is released as a byproduct of this process. While the chemical details aren't critical for arborists, understanding the inputs and outputs of photosynthesis helps explain why healthy leaves are essential for tree survival. Transpiration and gas exchange leaves also play a major role in water movement. Tiny openings on the leaf surface, called stomata, allow carbon dioxide to enter and oxygen and water vapor to exit. This process, known as transpiration, helps pull water upward through the xylem from the roots to the leaves. Transpiration also helps cool the tree and maintain internal balance, but excessive water loss can stress trees during drought conditions. Leaf adaptations and types leaves vary in shape, size, and structure depending on the tree species and environment. Broad, thin leaves are efficient at capturing sunlight, but may lose water more quickly. Needles and scale-like leaves reduce water loss and are better suited for cold or dry conditions. These adaptations tie directly back to tree classification, helping arborists predict how trees respond to climate and site conditions. Leaves, stress, and tree health leaf condition is often one of the first indicators of tree health. Discolored, small, or sparse leaves can signal stress related to water, nutrients, pests, or root problems. Because leaves produce energy, reduced leaf area can limit a tree's ability to store carbohydrates and recover from injury. This is why excessive or improper pruning can have serious consequences for tree health. This episode connects directly to earlier topics. Roots supply water and nutrients. The trunk transports those materials. Leaves use them to produce energy. Together, these systems support growth, defense, and long-term survival. Let's recap the key points. Leaves are the primary energy producers in trees through photosynthesis. They regulate water loss, exchange gases, and support overall tree health. Understanding leaf function helps arborists recognize stress, plan pruning, and manage trees more effectively. In the next episode, we'll talk about tree growth and development. We'll explore how trees grow taller, wider, and respond to seasonal changes over time. Thanks for listening to the Arborist-podcast. Let's keep building your arborist knowledge one topic at a time. Arborist-podcast, Episode 7, Tree Growth and Development, How Trees Grow. Over time. Welcome back to the Arborist-podcast. This podcast is designed to help you study for the Certified Arborist exam by breaking the material down into short, easy-to-follow episodes. As a reminder, this podcast is not affiliated with or endorsed by the International Society of Arboriculture. It's an independent educational resource created to support arborists preparing for the certification exam. In the last episode, we focused on leaves and photosynthesis and how trees capture and use energy. Today, we're going to talk about how trees grow and develop over time. Understanding tree growth helps arborists predict structure, manage pruning, and recognize normal versus abnormal development. What tree growth really means. Tree growth happens in two main ways. Trees grow taller and longer through what's called primary growth. They grow wider and stronger through secondary growth. Both types of growth are essential, and they occur in different parts of the tree. For arborists, knowing where and how growth happens explains why trees respond the way they do to pruning and injury. Primary growth, growing taller and longer. Primary growth occurs at the tips of shoots and roots. These growing tips are called apical meristems. They are responsible for increasing the length of branches, stems, and roots. Each year, buds produce new shoots that extend the canopy outward and upward. This is why pruning cuts made at branch tips can strongly influence the direction and shape of future growth. Secondary growth, growing wider and stronger. Secondary growth increases the diameter of stems, branches, and roots. This growth comes from the cambium, the thin layer of tissue we discussed earlier that produces new xylem and phloem. As new layers are added each year, the tree becomes wider and stronger, allowing it to support a larger canopy. Secondary growth also produces growth rings, which reflect yearly patterns of development and environmental conditions. Seasonal growth cycles. Tree growth follows seasonal patterns. In temperate climates, most growth occurs during the growing season, usually spring and early summer. During dormancy, growth slows or stops, allowing the tree to conserve energy and survive unfavorable conditions. Understanding seasonal growth helps arborists time pruning and other management practices to minimize stress and maximize recovery. Allocation of energy for growth trees must balance how they use energy. Energy produced by leaves is used for growth, storage, defense, and maintenance. Young trees often prioritize height growth to reach sunlight, while mature trees invest more energy in maintenance and defense. When trees are stressed, growth may slow as energy is redirected toward survival rather than expansion. Growth, structure, and arborist decisions. Tree growth patterns influence structure and long-term stability. Rapid growth can lead to weak branch attachments, while slow growth may indicate stress or limited resources. Arborists use knowledge of growth patterns to guide structural pruning, especially in young trees. Recognizing normal growth helps identify problems early before they become serious. This episode connects directly to what we've already covered. Photosynthesis provides the energy for growth. Cells and tissues make growth possible. Roots, stems, and leaves work together to support development. Tree growth is the visible result of all these systems working together. Let's recap the key points. Trees grow through primary growth, which increases length, and secondary growth, which increases diameter. Growth follows seasonal cycles and depends on available energy. Understanding growth helps arborists manage structure, plan pruning, and recognize stress. In the next episode, we'll talk about energy storage and transport in trees. We'll look at how trees store carbohydrates and why energy balance is so important to tree health. Thanks for listening to the Arborist-podcast. Let's keep building your arborist knowledge one topic at a time. Arborist-podcast, Episode 8, Energy Storage and Transport, How Trees Use and Manage Energy. Welcome back to the Arborist-podcast. This podcast is designed to help you study for the Certified Arborist Exam by breaking the material down into short, easy-to-follow episodes. As a reminder, this podcast is not affiliated with or endorsed by the International Society of Arboriculture. It's an independent educational resource created to support arborists preparing for the certification exam. In the last episode, we talked about how trees grow and develop over time. Today, we're focusing on energy, specifically how trees store energy, move it through the tree, and use it to survive stress and injury. Energy management is a key concept in arboriculture and comes up often in both the exam and real-world tree care. Where tree energy comes from. All of a tree's usable energy comes from photosynthesis. As we discussed earlier, leaves use sunlight, water, and carbon dioxide to produce sugars. These sugars are the basic fuel that powers nearly every process in the tree. Once produced in the leaves, this energy must be transported to other parts of the tree and stored for later use. Understanding where energy comes from helps explain why healthy leaves and adequate canopy are so important. How energy is transported. Energy in trees moves primarily through the phloem. Sugars produced in the leaves are transported through phloem tissue to areas of active growth, storage, and repair. Unlike water movement in xylem, which is mostly upward, energy movement in phloem can go in multiple directions depending on where energy is needed. This means energy can move down to the roots, outward to growing branches, or inward to storage tissues. Energy storage in trees store excess energy in the form of carbohydrates. These stored carbohydrates are found in roots, trunks, branches, and even buds. Energy storage allows trees to survive periods when photosynthesis is limited, such as winter dormancy, drought, or defoliation. Stored energy is also critical for producing new leaves in spring and for responding to injury or stress. Energy balance and tree health. Trees must balance how much energy they produce with how much they use. When a tree produces more energy than it needs for immediate growth and maintenance, the excess is stored. When energy demands exceed production, the tree must rely on stored reserves. If this imbalance continues for too long, the tree may decline, become more susceptible to pests and disease, or fail structurally. Stress, energy depletion, and recovery. Stressful events such as drought, construction damage, improper pruning, or defoliation reduce a tree's ability to produce energy. At the same time, stress increases energy demand for defense and repair. If stored energy is depleted faster than it can be replaced, the tree's health declines. This is why repeated stress events, even if minor individually, can have serious long-term effects on trees. Why energy matters to arborists. Understanding energy storage and transport helps arborists make better management decisions. For example, excessive pruning reduces leaf area and limits energy production. Root damage reduces energy storage and uptake of water and nutrients. Timing of pruning, planting, and other practices should always consider the tree's energy balance and recovery ability. This episode ties together many of the concepts we've already covered. Leaves produce energy, phloem transports it, roots and stems store it. Growth, defense, and recovery all depend on energy availability. Energy is the common thread that connects tree structure, function, and health. Let's recap the key points. Trees produce energy through photosynthesis, transport it through the phloem, and store it as carbohydrates. Stored energy allows trees to survive stress and fuel growth and repair. Maintaining a healthy energy balance is essential for long-term tree health. In the next episode, we'll talk about how trees defend themselves and respond to injury. We'll introduce the concept of compartmentalization and explain why trees don't heal the way animals do. Thanks for listening to the Arborist podcast. Let's keep building your arborist knowledge, one topic at a time. Arborist Podcast, Episode 9, Tree Defense and Compartmentalization, How Trees Respond to Injury. Welcome back to the Arborist Podcast. This podcast is designed to help you study for the Certified Arborist exam by breaking the material down into short, easy-to-follow episodes. As a reminder, this podcast is not affiliated with or endorsed by the International Society of Arboriculture. It's an independent educational resource created to support arborists preparing for the certification exam. In the last episode, we talked about energy storage and transport and why energy balance is so important to tree health. Today, we're going to look at how trees defend themselves and respond to injury. This topic is essential for understanding pruning, wound response, decay, and long-term tree stability. Trees are different from animals. One of the most important concepts for arborists to understand is that trees do not heal the way animals do. When animals are injured, damaged tissue is repaired and replaced. Trees respond differently. Instead of healing damaged tissue, trees isolate injured areas and protect the healthy tissue around them. The damaged wood remains, but its impact is managed. This is why old wounds can still be visible on trees many years later. What happens when a tree is injured? When a tree is wounded, several processes begin immediately. Transport tissues may be disrupted, energy may be redirected toward defense, and microorganisms such as fungi and bacteria may attempt to colonize the damaged area. The tree's goal is not to remove the damage, but to limit how far the damage spreads. The effectiveness of this response depends on the tree's health, energy reserves, and the size and location of the wound. Compartmentalization. Explained trees defend themselves through a process known as compartmentalization. Compartmentalization is the tree's ability to create internal barriers that limit the spread of decay and infection. Rather than repairing damaged wood, the tree builds barriers around the injured area, separating it from healthy tissue. These barriers slow or stop the movement of decay organisms and help preserve the tree's structural integrity over time. Introducing the CODIT concept. This defense process is commonly described using the CODIT model, which stands for compartmentalization of decay in trees. CODIT explains how trees form different types of barriers to resist the spread of decay, both vertically and horizontally within the wood. In this episode, we're introducing CODIT at a high level to help you understand the basic concept. If you'd like a deeper explanation of CODIT, including how each barrier works and how arborists apply this knowledge in the field, that will be covered in a separate dedicated podcast episode later in the series. Why pruning practices matter. Tree defense is closely tied to pruning practices. When pruning cuts are made correctly, trees are better able to compartmentalize wounds and limit decay. Improper pruning, such as flush cuts or unnecessarily large wounds, damages protective tissues and reduces the tree's ability to defend itself. This is why arborists place such importance on proper cut location, preserving the branch collar, and minimizing unnecessary injury. Defense, energy, and tree health. Defending against injury requires energy. Trees with strong energy reserves are better able to form effective defensive barriers. Trees under stress may have weaker defense responses, allowing decay to spread more easily. This directly connects back to earlier episodes on energy storage, photosynthesis, and stress management. This episode ties together many concepts we've already covered. Cells and tissues explain how defensive barriers are formed. Energy storage determines how strong those defenses can be. Growth patterns influence how wounds are sealed over time. Tree defense is not a separate system, it's part of how the entire tree functions. Let's recap the key points. Trees do not heal wounds the way animals do. Instead, they compartmentalize damage to limit decay and protect healthy tissue. The CODIT model helps explain this process, and we'll explore it in more detail in a separate episode later in the series. Proper pruning and overall tree health play a major role in effective tree defense. In the next episode, we'll complete Domain 1 by talking about aging, decline, and death in trees. We'll explore how trees change over time and how arborists distinguish normal aging from serious decline. Thanks for listening to the Arborist-podcast. Let's keep building your arborist knowledge one topic at a time. Arborist-podcast, episode 10, Aging, Decline, and Death in Trees, Understanding the End of the Life Cycle. Welcome back to the Arborist-podcast. This podcast is designed to help you study for the Certified Arborist Exam by breaking the material down into short, easy-to-follow episodes. As a reminder, this podcast is not affiliated with or endorsed by the International Society of Arboriculture. It's an independent educational resource created to support arborists preparing for the certification exam. In the last episode, we talked about how trees defend themselves and respond to injury. Today, we'll finish Domain 1 by looking at aging, decline, and death in trees. Understanding these processes helps arborists recognize what is normal, what is reversible, and when intervention may no longer be effective. Trees have a life cycle. Like all living organisms, trees go through stages of growth and development. They begin as seedlings, mature into fully developed trees, and eventually enter a stage of aging. Aging is a natural process and does not automatically mean a tree is unhealthy or unsafe. Many trees can live for decades or even centuries while continuing to provide environmental and aesthetic benefits. What aging looks like in trees. As trees age, growth rates often slow. You may see shorter annual shoot growth, smaller leaves, or reduced canopy density. Energy production may shift from growth to maintenance and defense. These changes are normal and do not necessarily indicate decline. Aging trees can still be structurally sound and biologically active. Decline versus normal aging. It's important to distinguish between normal aging and decline. Decline occurs when a tree's health deteriorates beyond what would be expected from age alone. This often involves a combination of stress factors such as root damage, soil compaction, drought, pests, disease, or repeated injury. Declining trees show reduced vigor, dieback, poor leaf quality, and reduced ability to recover from stress. Causes of tree decline. Tree decline is usually the result of multiple stresses rather than a single event. Construction damage, improper pruning, changes in soil grade, and chronic drought can all contribute. When stress exceeds the tree's ability to produce and store energy, recovery becomes difficult. Understanding the history of site conditions is often key to diagnosing decline. The role of arborists in managing decline. Arborists play a critical role in evaluating aging and declining trees. Management decisions may include improving site conditions, reducing stress, pruning to manage risk, or in some cases, recommending removal. Not all trees can be saved, and recognizing when decline is irreversible is an important professional responsibility. Good arboriculture balances tree preservation with safety and realistic expectations. Tree death and decomposition. Eventually, all trees die. Tree death may occur gradually through decline or suddenly due to failure, disease, or severe environmental stress. After death, trees become part of the ecosystem through decomposition, providing habitat and nutrients for other organisms. Understanding this process helps arborists explain management decisions and ecological value to clients and the public. This episode brings Domain 1 full circle. Tree biology explains how trees grow, store energy, defend themselves, and respond to stress. Aging, decline, and death reflect the long-term outcome of how well these systems function over time. Everything we've covered in this domain forms the biological foundation for all other arboriculture practices. Let's recap the key points. Aging is a natural process in trees and does not automatically mean decline. Decline occurs when stress overwhelms a tree's ability to recover. Arborists must recognize the difference between normal aging and serious decline and make informed management decisions accordingly. That completes Domain 1, Tree Biology. In the next domain, we'll shift our focus to soils and water and explore how below-ground conditions influence tree health and growth. Thanks for listening to the Arborist-podcast. You've now built a strong foundation in tree biology. Let's keep moving forward, one domain at a time. Arborist-podcast, bonus episode. CODIT, compartmentalization of decay in trees explained. Welcome back to the Arborist podcast. This podcast is designed to help you study for the Certified Arborist exam by breaking the material down into short, easy-to-follow episodes. As a reminder, this podcast is not affiliated with or endorsed by the International Society of Arboriculture. It's an independent educational resource created to support arborists preparing for the certification exam. In a previous episode, we introduced the idea that trees do not heal wounds the way animals do. Instead, they defend themselves through a process called compartmentalization. In this episode, we're going to focus specifically on CODIT, which stands for compartmentalization of decay in trees, and explain how this concept helps arborists understand decay, pruning, and long-term tree stability. Why CODIT matters to arborists. CODIT is one of the most important concepts in modern arboriculture. It explains how trees respond internally to wounds, decay, and infection, and why the location and size of a wound matter so much. Understanding CODIT helps arborists make better decisions about pruning, injury management, and tree risk assessment. Rather than asking whether a tree can heal, CODIT helps us ask a more useful question. Can the tree successfully contain the damage? Trees do not heal, they compartmentalize. When a tree is wounded, the damaged wood remains damaged. Unlike animals, trees cannot repair or replace injured tissues once they are formed. Instead, trees respond by isolating the damaged area and protecting the healthy wood around it. This process is called compartmentalization, and it limits the spread of decay rather than eliminating it. This is why decay often remains localized rather than spreading throughout the entire tree. What CODIT actually describes. CODIT is a model that describes how trees create internal barriers to slow or stop the spread of decay. These barriers are often described as walls. Some walls exist naturally as part of the tree's structure, while others are formed in response to injury. The strength and effectiveness of these walls depend on the species, the tree's health, and its available energy reserves. CODIT does not guarantee that decay will stop. It explains how trees attempt to control it. The 4 CODIT walls, high-level overview. CODIT describes 4 types of barriers, often referred to as Wall 1 through Wall 4. Wall 1 resists the vertical spread of decay within the wood. Wall 2 resists inward spread toward the center of the tree. Wall 3 resists lateral spread around the circumference of the stem. These first 3 walls are part of the tree's existing structure and vary in strength between species. Wall 4 is different. It is formed after injury and separates new growth from damaged wood. Wall 4 is often the strongest barrier and plays a major role in long-term containment of decay. CODIT and pruning. CODIT explains why proper pruning cuts are so important. When pruning cuts are made outside the branch collar, the tree can form effective barriers and limit decay. Flush cuts remove protective tissues and weaken the tree's ability to compartmentalize. Large wounds require more energy to defend and are more difficult for trees to contain. Good pruning practices work with the tree's natural defense systems rather than against them. Energy, stress, and compartmentalization. Compartmentalization requires energy. Trees with good energy reserves are better able to form strong defensive barriers. Trees under stress, such as those affected by drought, root damage, or poor site conditions, may have weaker compartmentalization responses. This is why managing stress and maintaining overall tree health are critical parts of decay management. CODIT connects directly to earlier topics like photosynthesis, energy storage, and root health. CODIT and tree risk. CODIT helps arborists understand why decay does not automatically mean failure. A tree can have significant internal decay and still be structurally sound if decay is well compartmentalized and enough sound wood remains. At the same time, poor compartmentalization can lead to expanding decay and increased risk over time. CODIT does not replace tree risk assessment, but it provides essential biological context for evaluating structural integrity. CODIT ties together many concepts from tree biology. Cells and tissues explain how barriers are formed, energy storage supports defense, growth patterns influence how new wood isolates damaged areas. Understanding CODIT helps arborists see trees as dynamic systems responding to injury over time. Let's recap the key points. Trees do not heal damaged wood. They defend themselves by compartmentalizing decay. CODIT explains how trees form internal barriers to limit the spread of decay and protect healthy tissue. Proper pruning, good energy balance, and overall tree health all support effective compartmentalization. That concludes this focused episode on CODIT. As you continue studying arboriculture, keep this concept in mind whenever you think about pruning, wounds, decay, or tree risk. Thanks for listening to the Arborist-podcast. Let's keep building your arborist knowledge, one concept at a time. Welcome back to the Arborist-podcast, where we grow your tree knowledge one concept at a time. Today, we're diving into one of the most important processes in all of arboriculture, photosynthesis. If you're prepping for the ISA Certified Arborist Exam, this is a must-know. Not just to pass the test, but to understand how trees stay alive, grow, and thrive. So let's break it down. Photosynthesis is the process by which green plants, including trees, convert light energy into chemical energy. In other words, it's how trees make their own food. Without photosynthesis, there's no tree growth, no energy for root expansion, no healing from pruning cuts, nothing. So yeah, it's kind of a big deal. Let's talk ingredients. To photosynthesize, a tree needs three things: sunlight, carbon dioxide, and water. Sunlight provides energy. Carbon dioxide is absorbed from the air through tiny pores in the leaf, called stomata, and water is pulled up from the roots through the xylem. These ingredients come together in structures inside the leaf called chloroplasts, where the green pigment chlorophyll lives, and that's where the magic happens. Let's walk through the process step by step. Step 1, light absorption. Chlorophyll captures sunlight like tiny solar panels. This light energy powers everything that follows. Step 2, water split, also called photolysis. Using sunlight, the tree splits water molecules into hydrogen and oxygen. The oxygen is released into the air through the stomata. The hydrogen is kept inside to help build sugar molecules. Step 3, carbon fixation. Carbon dioxide from the air combines with hydrogen to create glucose, a simple sugar that acts as food for the tree. This sugar moves through the phloem to feed growing tissues like roots, buds, and branches. Now, why does this matter to arborists? Here's how. First, photosynthesis drives growth. No photosynthesis means no energy. That means no new wood, no root expansion, no healing. If you see a thin or sparse canopy, photosynthesis is probably limited. Second, canopy health is everything. That's why we don't over-prune. Removing too many leaves reduces the tree's ability to make food. Less food means weaker roots, slower growth, and less resistance to pests or stress. Third, water impacts photosynthesis directly. If a tree doesn't have enough water, it can't photosynthesize. Drought conditions cause stomata to close, cutting off the tree's ability to take in carbon dioxide. On the flip side, overwatering can suffocate roots, reducing water uptake and stressing the system from below. Photosynthesis is tied to just about every decision we make in tree care, from where we plant, to how we water, to how we prune. If a tree is damaged from soil compaction, construction, or disease, it needs stored sugars to recover. If it's not photosynthesizing well, it doesn't have the reserves to fight back. So, what do you need to know for the ISA exam? Here's a quick recap. Photosynthesis happens in the chloroplasts inside leaf cells. Chlorophyll is the pigment that captures sunlight. The inputs are light, carbon dioxide, and water. The outputs are glucose and oxygen. Water and nutrients move up through the xylem. Sugars move down through the phloem. Simple, elegant, and essential to life. Trees are solar-powered sugar factories. As arborists, we protect that process. By preserving the canopy, managing water, and maintaining soil health, we give the tree the best chance to do what it's designed to do. Grow, thrive, defend, repeat. That's it for this episode of the Arborist Podcast. If this helped you study, hit that like button, subscribe, and leave a comment. What part of tree biology do you want covered next? Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and take care of those trees.